Okay, thank you all for joining us. You know, for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Eric Boduch. I'm one of the founders, and I run marketing for Pendo. It's an interesting panel I get to moderate here today because we're talking about behaviors and conversions. And as you might guess, as a marketing person, conversions are kind of important to me. But those are very specific types of conversions, doing things like driving people to a demo. There's a lot of other behaviors that are important to people. Things you want to accomplish. I mean, even just looking at it, in my daily activities, one of the things that I do from time to time is set up landing pages, right? I go into Pardot, I go through a process of setting up landing pages. And that's a specific type of behavior, right? How do I go through those steps? How effectively do I accomplish my task? Is it done efficiently? Do I have to go back because I forgot to create a list? Those types of things, those types of behaviors. We all want to make sure we can help our customers accomplish tasks, convert, or get our jobs done as efficiently as possible. So with that intro, I was going to next have each of the panelists here introduce themselves and talk about an initial use case where they thought about an important behavior and how they tried to help their users accomplish it more effectively or do it better. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brooks first.
Oh, thanks. I'm Brooks Adcock. I'm product innovator at Dude Solutions. My job is to break things. We have a lot of instances where we need to convert clients for various reasons. So I think, like you said, we can really generalize that. We have clients, obviously, we want to purchase products. We have clients we want to increase their value by introducing them to new suites of products. We have next generation products that are coming out, and that'll be kind of my example, where we want to move people who are suitable from a legacy product to a new product. And at the base of all of those conversions, there's really behavior. When you ask the question of, is someone suitable, or another way to ask that is, who among people is suitable to convert, and whatever that means. So that's kind of where we're going. I don't know if you want to get any detail on that. I'll give it to Steve to give his.
Yep. So I'm Steve Petric. I'm Director of Product Management for Elsevier. Elsevier, for those who don't know, is part of a parent company called RELX, and it's also, LexisNexis is a division of RELX, so that's based here in Raleigh, or a good portion of it is. So Elsevier sells health and science information content, and we also have a line of academic researcher products that's also used by corporate researchers. So we're trying to help researchers do their job. So it's simply get funding, publish, and then showcase their work. So a lot of things that we're trying to do at Elsevier is university academic researchers have access to our products. Most of the large universities do. But for us, it's about getting them to get engaged and getting them to renew with us. So for us, we're trying to get the users to register, to log in, to share more information about who they are. And if we have that information, we feel we can really enhance their experience, make them more successful, and again, more engaged and be able to renew with us. So that's kind of our goal and why what attracted us to Pendo.
Great. That's a good introduction. So let's talk a little bit about desired behaviors, different types of behaviors you guys try to instill and get people thinking about, or you think about as you implement and get people involved in your products.
So the big thing that we're facing right now is getting people to the next level of value and a next generation of products. And so we are an agile company. We develop the roller skate and then the scooter and the skateboard and the bike to the car, right? So as we're developing those things, a greater and greater subsegment is potentially capable of coming over to that new level of value. So how do we drive that? We have an interesting problem that we have probably now over 10,000 clients. All the tools that you might normally use to do that, looking at reviewing client accounts, it breaks down at that level. There's really just no amount of human resources, even though we have substantial human resources to do it. There's not really human resources to do that. For example, one such task we evaluated would cost, just in the cursory effort of shifting a segment of people over, would cost $7 million in human labor to do if we didn't have some way of automating that. So the way we approach that problem, generally speaking, was to look at behavioral data, in particular behavioral data out of Pendo, because you can kind of categorize data in two ways. There's behavioral data, and then there's just sort of facts about accounts. Facts are you've created this many events on a calendar, but behavior is, do you look at that calendar every day, right? So if you're using the calendar example, if you are trying to evaluate whether this feature is valuable or necessary for a client, if you just look at the raw number of events on the calendar, you can say, oh, well, nothing's been created in the past 9 months. Well, little did you know they created everything for the whole year up front, but everybody looks at it every day, right? So behavior becomes critical. Being able to get in that product becomes critical, and knowing that and then using that to drive decisions. So what we're looking at doing, and we have done to a large extent, is we can look at those behaviors, and we're actually using a little bit of AI to categorize people's willingness to shift over based on actual past true events. And when the AI can flag a client as being suitable, that runs through human eyes, but we can then move them over. And so what we're looking at doing, the next step in that for us is to use Pendo guys to say, hey, we're going to cherry pick out clients and say, hey, you, based on what just came out yesterday and what you were doing yesterday, physical, your actual behaviors, you're now suitable. We think you have a 90% chance of converting over. So I'm going to throw this Pendo guide at you to prompt you to reach this new level of value.
That's good. So for us, we started simple. Maybe to back up a little bit, we've used Pendo for about 7 months or so. And I know talking to Brooks, you guys have been using it for 18 months or so. So
Yeah.
him and I were talking just about how our evolution of going through Pendo and discovering all we can do. But what really attracted us, we talked about trying to get users to register, and then the next time they come in to log back in. And maybe I'll jump to another question already. But when did Pendo win me over? It's like when I saw segmentation and how easy it was. That was like, wow. Because we were doing messaging inside of our product, and I'd have an engineer, we'd have stories, and they'd be working it, and it would just take time, and we were very slow, and we had difficulty targeting certain users, right? We were messaging everybody, and nobody was doing anything, right? So we could identify anonymous users and message them, and we could specifically call it and hit a certain user flow point. The right message at the right time gets the right action, and that really was the key thing for us. So we did that and we told them the why, right? We're not going to say, hey, go register because we want your email address, right? We're telling them, hey, this is what you can do. Here are the benefits. So we talked about that, but it's really about the specific segment at the right time, getting the right action. So we did some initial tests, and we're at a large enterprise, right? I mean, Elsevier is a very large company, and we have to do a lot of justifications for what we're doing. So we did some test cases, and we saw over 120% in a little sample study that we did, when we did our own messaging and we just went to everybody versus the targeted messages. We did an A/B test, and we said, and then we heard back, we said, well, you didn't do an A/B test, so it's not really accurate, so that's fine. So we went back into Pendo, quickly turned it on, used the A/B kind of function. We can have the groups. We showed 220% increase doing it. So that was like, wow, this is on to something. Yeah. So that, for us, that opened our eyes, and then a list of other things came out on it. Using segmentation, NPS. We did kind of an email blast campaign to all of our registered users. So we were getting NPS from happy customers. And guess what? We have a very high NPS. What we didn't know is what about the users that didn't register, what their NPS was. So we had that opportunity within Pendo to target those users. And fortunate for us, we even have a higher, it's a good thing, bad thing, I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but we have a higher NPS for people that haven't registered. So in any event, we've never had any of that information before. So now that we do, it opened our eyes to a lot more potential and how we can use that now.
So let's dig in a little more on that, Steve, since we started down the segmentation path. Can you talk about how you break up your different segments and how you target them differently?
Yeah. So really for us, we only have like 3% of our users that register. So we clean those folks out. We don't really target them with any of the register button, obviously. We're telling them about things that maybe they're not taking full advantage of, right? We have a lot of kind of personalized features, so we're targeting them on a different lines of feature sets. Where the non-registered users, we're really going after something very basic, and we're looking at, we know what a successful event is for our users, so we're trying to time that message in and around those kinds of events because we feel they're in a happier state of mind. They've gotten success out of what they're doing in our product, and we've seen increases in doing that. It's all about the right people at the right time And for us, we've seen great success. And it's led to, other product groups within Elsevier to kind of really shake their head and like, wow, this is that easy to do. It's been a good experience up to this point.
Awesome. I mean, Brooks,
Yeah.
segmentation, I mean, that's a good parlay.
I can't back that up enough. I mean, it's the right segment at the right time. I think the only difference is that with our segments, we have sort of traditional segments. So I'm an innovation, so I'm allowed to try things with a high likelihood of not working, but this has actually started to pan out. We have a traditional set of segments that a human might go in with a spreadsheet and say, these people are in these segments. One of the really fun things that Pendo has allowed us to do is question that entire paradigm of that classical paradigm of segmentation. So what if you didn't define your segments at all based on their NAICS code or any of those things, what industry they're in? What if you did it purely behaviorally? What if you said that, okay, we have clients in education and manufacturing, but based on behavior, these two clients in different traditional segments, they have the same value structure. They want to do the same things, perform the same kind of actions within the product. So now it's not pertinent that their NAICS code is different, but Pendo allows us through their super dope API. If you haven't played with it, I highly recommend it. I deal with 9 APIs right now, and it is by far my favorite. We can go in there and look at those. We can look at those behaviors. I'm all hot for this thing because, man, REST is so old school, and MongoDB pipeline is just the way to go. If you're looking at implementing an API, check it out. It's so cool. But one of the things it lets us do is get in there and look at that behavioral data in basically real time and say what actually matters to people. So we can then cluster those people. So K-means is one way of doing it. And decision trees is another way that we're doing it currently. Both of those have fairly decent sort of transparency, so they're good to present to people. But it's another facet of this. But you can do these segmentations based on behavior, and then you get truly, like you said, the right person, and then based on that real-time behavior at the right time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So aha moments. I mean, what was your biggest aha moment as you're kind of going through conversion behaviors, segmentation, and what was the big thing you're like, wow, I can do some really cool things?
There's been many. The first aha was looking at the traditional way of measuring these kinds of things, looking in databases and trying to segment clients based on what's in databases or whatever, and having this moment of that's not in the calendars. I think for us was like the big cue that hey, we're not actually measuring real behavior by looking at this calendar, these event informations, right? There's other ways these sequences can come about that don't meet our assumptions. So we need real behavioral data. That was the first aha. That really, I think, I wasn't hugely involved in the initial decision, but I've spoken with people who were, and that led to the initial, hey, let's use Pendo and get this. And oh, by the way, we have these guides. That's cool. Aha number 2 was, oh man, we have access to this information. Maybe we don't have to segment, these clients traditionally. And then the third aha was, oh wait, we can trigger guides programmatically. That's like the third, where we can now just connect this entire cycle of information to drive behavior and then measure and do it in a way that when you have more clients than you can put fingers on, you can still scale it using automation and AI. And that was just a huge epiphany.
Yeah, for first was the segmentation and the ease of use. The second thing was when I realized that I can affect all 3 of my primary KPIs, from revenue to NPS, and then MAU, which is registered users, at my fingertips. I can take it out of the hands of the engineers, and I can make it happen that much quicker. I had more control over what I'm responsible for, right? And in product management, that's all I've ever asked for is, give me the tools to let me do my job, and this was a tool that did that. We have other tools. We're a large enterprise. We've got a lot of other tools, but they're not as quick and easy to use. I'm taking work away from one group and putting it into my hands that I have complete control. That was it, and it became clear for us that can help me do my job, and now we're able to leverage it in many different ways.
So let's talk a little off script. Let's talk about your use of the API. Like what kind of behaviors you utilize that data to drive.
So the main goal is to measure all the things. So because we have this system that doesn't rely on human eyes, we can look at the current number that I counted, and I realized I was lazy and forgot to add a few to this, so it's probably much higher. But we're looking at over 1,000 metrics. 1,080 something was the last count I looked at. And that's just pick things that are important to different products and measure all those things. So through the API, in particular the aggregation component of the API, we're able to leverage that MongoDB pipeline to get at that data extremely, extremely efficiently and get it whatever we want at whatever level of granularity, which is just fabulous. It is true, that API is true fodder for machine learning, man. It's what you need. REST is, if you play with REST APIs and machine learning, they just don't quite match, right? You kind of have to transform things and cache things, but that, it's just like stick it in, let it roll, and get the insight out of it that you need. And once it's in and once those inferences are made, there's kind of two things you do. First, you get the inference out and you do cool stuff with it, but you can also sort of reverse engineer using certain algorithms, like decision trees. You can look at what are the important factors in our data and what things, so a neat case would be, say, 3 pages, right? So you have page A, B, and C, and in your mind, more use of all 3 is important, right? What machine learning does through the API, which is really enabled by the API, so this is instead of 3, this is 3,000 or something. Well, A, yes, more use of A means more conversion. But it turns out statistically, more use of B means fewer conversions, and C just doesn't make a difference. So being able to get everything and not have any, what's it called, a priori, or have any assumptions applied to it and just let the stats speak for themselves, that's so powerful. It's so powerful to let you know, here's what's important. Yes, people are using the hell out of that page, but you can take it away and not maintain it, and it will not impact your bottom line. But this other page that is like, seems marginally used, if you take that away, you're just going to blow up everything. So having that API to drive that information is super critical.
It's definitely interesting. Staying on AI, and then I'll jump back to you, Steve. How would you advise other people here to leverage AI to make data analysis more scalable, more efficient? I mean, any kind of things you would point to and say, think about this?
From an AI perspective, I think it's an interesting door to crack open. If you're going to jump into it, there's a lot of shiny objects that you can get distracted by, so be aware of that. Use free tools whenever possible. Use things at scale. AWS is a good platform to do AI on. Python, I'm a huge Python evangelist. It's free and it has incredibly powerful AI on it. Basically, whenever research is done in AI, it seems like the person writing their PhD does their thesis, their dissertation, and they prove it in Python, so like you get the cutting edge stuff. And then that turns into really well-supported things in the end. So you get all the algorithms in there for free. Don't ever invent your own algorithms. Don't get in that business. That's a mire. And go for all the data. Just start. A really great place to start is with kind of data warehousing and making sure that your systems that you use, being discriminating and making sure the systems that you use can get you the data that you need to succeed. Pendo is a no-brainer. Others are a little more difficult, and that's a really good way to kind of get going and just start throwing algorithms, get the warehouse together, throw algorithms at stuff, start your algorithms, do sort of categories of algorithms. One kind, or you have sort of open boxes that you can see what happened, and there's like black box algorithms. Examples, Markov models and decision trees are easily auditable. Neural networks are less auditable. Principal component analysis also less auditable. So start with, so that your execs get buy-in, start with the sort of open box algorithms, which are going to be slightly less powerful, but people are going to build trust. And then once you've built trust around those, then implement the more powerful algorithms and cross-validate. So that's kind of a rough approach to getting into that. So
a final AI question, and we'll jump off that topic for a little bit, but I know you mentioned on one of our calls drawbacks. What's the drawbacks to using AI to drive mission-critical business decisions?
You have to watch it. You have to have eyes on, and you can't you have to be cognizant of human factors in it. The thing I think you should really look to replicate is the best practices of your people. So I think where you really go off the rails with AI is if you just let it go and do its thing. But the important thing to remember is that, despite what how the media would paint AI, the real value of it is that it lets people be people. And so engineer it around making it so that people are doing less rote tasks and more of what makes them a valuable emotional contributor to the benefit of your company and your clients. So that's sort of the pitfalls, is things you got to kind of watch out for. And also do not write your own algorithms.
So your AI is not going to become self-aware and take over the world,
No,
right?
yeah, it is not going to become self-aware. It's not going to take over the world. What it will do is if you do it right, it'll create a really beautiful feedback loop where it's a person learning from a machine learning from a person. And so that's what you want to create. And if you haven't created that feedback loop, you're already destined for failure.
So Steve, you were talking about you're 7 months into doing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
What's next? What's the big push over the next 7?
Yeah, so our competency level of just using the tool has increased quite a bit. So we're still working on getting users to register, and we're just flavoring that up in a lot of different ways. So we're getting more tuned in. We've got all the pages and features that are mapped really well. We're moving on from that. We're going to continue to do the NPS and always kind of gauge that. We're also working more with sales to find out, for let's say our big fish, our big renewals that are coming up, what are ways that we can help them 9 months out, 6 months out from renewal, getting survey feedback, getting other polls surveys that we'll run inside the product and funnel that into more of a sales perspective, because a lot of our business is about retention, so we see that as a great avenue for us to take advantage of. We've also leveraged it inside of larger items on our roadmap from a redesign of the site, so we're able to incorporate the feedback, the analytics that comes back into it, as well as any questions we might have for certain types of users, because we have a huge, we're probably like a 10-80-10 if I had to break up our users in terms of you got 10 that are fairly fluent, you got 80% kind of in the middle, and you got 10% kind of at the bottom, and you're trying to move that 80 to 75 and move them north, right? So we're finding ways using Pendo to find out how to engage them more. We know and watch users in the user flow. If they're going to do, let's say, 2 steps, we know the 3rd and 4th step is the next logical step, but we see people hang out there. That's the time when we can message. So we think we can really enhance their experience and make it more unique so they can come back to us each and every time. So we've included NPS, we've included in all of the major initiatives now that we're doing. There's some component of messaging our users either to solve a question we have or help drive a renewal that we're focused on.
So sticking with you, Steve, let's talk about some of the issues you had in getting things started, getting implemented,
Yeah.
in your first 7 months, and then I think, we'll go to Brooks and, his first 18, right?
Right.
So what were the biggest challenges you had, and how did you guys overcome them?
Well, we had to convince, I think, Pendo a little bit that we needed a longer trial period, just because of a large organization kind of moves at a certain speed. As much as you want to convince them, it's sometimes tough to kind of get people to recognize it. But I think, one of the quick things that we did is we put it to test. We had a real initiative inside of our company, which is monthly active users, get people to register. So we quickly put that in place and showed people, what this could do. And then we quickly got some heads turning, and then we were able to share a little bit more, did some A/B tests. So we're following kind of our data-driven kind of mentality of product management at Elsevier, and I think across all Reed Elsevier is that way. And this just fit right inside of that. We also had to be aware that there's other tools that are inside our enterprise that we've invested in, right? So you've got to explain and identify how this product works together with it or fills a space that it didn't provide. So those are some things that we needed to kind of just be aware of as we communicated this so people across the enterprise see the value that this is not just another tool or it replaces one. It's really a unique spot that it fits, and it's all in one easy-to-use interface. And really the kicker is once they hear it, you're taking it out of the engineering's hands and you're putting it in product management. I mean, that really kind of sealed it up, I think, for us. And internally, that really got people aware of it.
Yeah, not having not having the need to use those scarce resources, right?
Right.
That was a big thing. So it sounds like results, overcame a lot of the issues you did have, right?
Yeah.
When you could point to it and say, yes, we're doing this, and this is
Right.
how it's different. It might sound a little like this other product we have, but here's the results we got out of it, and this
Right.
is what we did.
Right.
And, even going back and doing a second A/B test or a stronger A/B test and saying, results actually turned out better.
That's
I
right.
mean, that helped you push it through.
Yep, exactly. And the charting too, within the tool, everything's, you got that kind of summary of what you just ran, and you can track it with, a specific event, right? You're getting the guides being shown on the bar chart, and you can plot exactly what action, what goal you're targeting. That just sells itself. I don't have to go off and kind of create my own little chart and try to emulate it, right? You've got it all inside that tool. So it became real easy to share. And once you've got, senior management sat down and put them in front of it, it told the story very well by itself. Yeah.
What about you, Brooks?
I was sort of on the periphery of when it was adopted, but I don't feel like there were any big hang-ups. I feel like the enthusiasm was pretty high, and the ongoing trend has been, as we've dug in, we keep having these sort of little aha moments around, oh wait, we could do this. If we use things this way and mix and match this way, we could do this other thing. Or so there's constantly new opportunities to use the tool to drive higher value for people, and it's been very exciting to do that.
Now Steve's talked a lot about measuring success. What about you, Brooks? I mean, what were your measures of success? What numbers did you have to prove?
So there's a few numbers that I go for, but at the end of the day, we have, say, taking this case of moving someone to a next generation product. Did they do it? Right, that's the litmus test. So that actually came in two phases, and this is where that human feedback loop is important. We were able to use the machine learning to really clone, or better yet, scale the knowledge of our best client service people, where they could kind of look at some accounts and say, this guy's good, this guy's bad, boom, boom, boom. And they gave 20 examples, and machine learning trained on that and gave its initial set of suggestions. And from that, real events fell out. And so the ultimate measure is against those real events. So presumably when you're doing those transformations, not all transformations happen all at exactly the same time. One of the benefits of using AI is that even if those events happen in rapid succession, the AI can keep up and watching those real events transpire. And every time a real event transpires, that's a new data point to relearn. So that would be an example. So other things could be, if a client support call comes in, right? That could be an event against which you're training. So we're looking for all those kind of key performance indicators of what ultimately is the end of the day measure of success.
Yeah, that spurred some thoughts for me, this whole talk of AI, because we spend a lot of time, and I've worked with some clients thinking about trial conversions, right? And I like to think about red and green kind of trials. Where reds are the ones that don't convert. Why didn't they convert? And we usually spend a lot of time analyzing those types of things. And I've worked with clients in the past that have spent a lot of time analyzing that, thinking about, what could we have done better? What should we have showed them? What didn't they use? And my thinking's really flipped recently to let's spend more time on greens. And let's figure out what makes them green. What do they do? What do they look at? How do they accomplish tasks? What tasks do they accomplish? How quickly do they do that? And now start thinking about modeling those greens. Yeah. And now listening to you today, I'm thinking, well, I got to get AI doing this for me, right? Because there's all these different components, these features, this amount of time.
Yeah.
If you can get enough data in there, you should be able to build this perfect green model, and then use things like guides to guide people. We know if they haven't used spell check within 5 days, let's send them a guide, because if they use it between 5 and 7 days, they're 20% more likely to convert. And I can see some really cool things we can do by combining that together.
Yeah, precisely. You can look at those greens and look at what the deltas are and really focus on those deltas. What is common between greens that does not exist in the reds? And that's really the fundamental question. And then tools to do it for doing that, if that's something that you're interested in, or it's something that we're looking at. Neural networks are a really good way to do that, but if you want to really audit the whys, and it takes a little bit of data pre-processing, but Markov models, hidden Markov models are a really great way of looking at that and looking at a chain of events and ignoring the things that are irrelevant and focusing on the things that are the statistically causal components to reaching green.
Sounds awesome. Now I can justify to my wife why I haven't thrown out my Carnegie Mellon books from my Lisp classes on neural networks and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it's going to come in handy one of these days.
One of these
We're doing trial conversion models in marketing, right? It's awesome. Steve, you talked about larger organizations. How did that affect your whole purchase and implementation? How was it different?
It's hard to compare, but it just takes a longer than expected time to move through it. As we brought in other groups, and I think one thing that we did is we have another kind of a product group that was comparing another tool, and we kind of did a evaluation, both separate groups doing their own evaluation, and then we kind of had kind of a knowledge share, and it was a clear evaluation. We brought in folks from the architecture group that had no kind of ownership in any of the product groups, and we were able to kind of evaluate them side by side. So that was part of, I think, the approval process. Is we brought in UX, we brought in other product teams, we brought in even security to evaluate this, because that's in a large enterprise, there's a lot of things that you've got to consider from a performance standpoint, from a security standpoint, that we had to evaluate. And I think once you showed how you brought all those folks and they evaluated it, and then we judged the other offering against Pendo, side by side, that helped justify, it was a clear kind of delineation of who the winner was on that one, and that kind of moved things a lot quicker, and it helped other product groups, get their attention as well, because I think that's part of the thing too is, what we're doing and how we're using Pendo is not a product-specific thing. It's it's product management function thing. It's about doing your job, be more data-driven, have the tools at your hands, be able to affect the end result. And we got other groups involved, and they saw the value of it, and it kind of just spread from there. It's more about awareness. I don't think many people knew about Pendo. And like I said, we were doing guides on our own separately, and then I found it, but by chance, I think reading Pragmatic Marketing is how I came across Pendo about 8 months ago. So
Thank you, Pragmatic.
exactly.
Awesome. Well, I know we were going to try to save 15 minutes for questions. I think we're about 14. Questions from the audience?
Ladies first. I know you guys are talking about converting trial to, making them actual clients. Have you looked into retention and new clients? Do you use Pendo for that, for the data from that?
I think once you have that data and you are defining what your success is, and it's pick an arbitrary number, whether it's new acquisition or renewal or whatever, that's your win against which you're going to measure your stats. At least that's our kind of philosophy of it.
Yeah, for retention, we're beginning to trial some ideas. I mean, a lot of what we're doing is more about experiments. I mean, we're starting off with what we consider big fish. These are big accounts, because those are the ones that have the biggest impact to the bottom line. So we're looking at ways that we can provide feedback back to the sales team. So we have large consortia deals that are many universities and have a large revenue number. So we're looking at ways to just isolate that group, see their behavior, and model that against what we know as maybe some positive or good renewable customers in the past, and then see how we can survey them via like an NPS, but also then maybe increase the number of types of guides that are going on in that group of customers, to maybe speak to them. Brooks, you mentioned earlier about it's really about speaking to users at the level that they're at, right? I mean, so much of what we do is going over the heads of so many of our users, but if you bring it down and can target people with that right message, we can move them up, that competency scale. In my mind, we've got this scale of where our users are at, and it's the ability to talk to them just a little bit above of where they're at with the right message to get them to do that next, feature use, and then all of a sudden it opens up and they're more engaged and they're likely to come back. So we're experimenting with a couple big fish and kind of targeting those things and kind of learning and creating some best practices out of that we can then spread to other ones. But we think the potential is there. We can do a lot more. We're just trying to figure out what's that secret sauce of making it work.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, and it made me think about some of the things we're seeing other clients do, and we've talked about doing ourselves. I mean, Adam talked early from Optimizely, who's in the crowd over there, about the seeds of churn are sown early. It sounds like it should be in like a Sauron voice from like Lord of the Rings or something, but it's true. I mean, the onboarding experience is really essential, even though you don't think about it because, you know, it might be an annual contract, but that initial implementation, the experience they have is really important. So we've done and continue to do a lot of, you know, data modeling, a lot of data scientist work, a lot of analysis about like, okay, what was the onboarding experience like for this cohort? How well did they retain? But even better, like where was expansion? How quickly did they expand their usage? So we're seeing a lot of that. We're spending a lot of time trying to segment people now based upon not only behaviors but competency kind of information. And by that I don't mean like, oh, this person isn't good, but more like this person is less experienced, or, you know, we know people use these particular segments of the product, so we know that they're more likely to want to learn about this. So we're trying to build, you know, very tight segment layers where we can target guides, information, and really even adapt the interface in some ways to people based upon what we know about them, their behaviors, their experience level, their role inside the company, the types of things they're trying to accomplish. And I think those types of things, the more you can help people, you know, really be more efficient in their daily lives, the less likely they are going to churn. So.
How much of your onboarding process is it, you have like implementation managers that walk people through the process? What is your onboarding like? Or is it no human touch from your support or your clients?
Yeah, so for us at Pendo, and you guys can answer this too, I think, you know, there's a lot of, we like to touch right now. So, I mean, in a good way, when invited. So no, you know, we definitely like to make sure we guide people to accomplish their tasks. So I think it's important. Now, you know, I just had a conversation with the Lean Kid out in the hallway about self-service, right? How you help people through a trial process that maybe you don't want to get the salespeople involved, don't even want to do a first demo. And those are always give and takes. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could get, you know, a certain segment of our customers completely through a trial process without any interactions? And that might be great, maybe. So we experiment with that. We look at that.
Yeah, we're extremely heavy on the human side of onboarding. And one of the things that's on my radar to experiment with and see how I can optimize is look at how can we scale that out. Obviously, when there's benefits to having that human touch, you get that personal relationship built, you customize it. It's incidentally hugely successful. One of the things coming from outside the dude into the dude that impressed me and still to this day impresses me is that they have made a client service model so personable. Like when you call our company, a human answers on the third ring, by the third ring. And if they don't, there's like after action. So then they get you to exactly the right person you need to talk to, and it's just dealt with. And that's amazing. It's amazing. It's the amount of revenue and retention. Our retention rates, when we say, you know, our retention rates are like over 98%. People are like, no, you must be mistaken. No, it is, because we have relationships. We build relationships, and that's important. Cannot emphasize how important that is. So the challenge is, okay, great, do that, but how do you scale it? So you succeed. You do it, you succeed. Your next problem is, well, there's lots of them. So how do you leverage automation to still get those touch points where they matter? It's into a question of what matters, all right? How do you get those touch points where they make the most impact? But then you can scale it using, you know, guides and other things. So I think there's an art, and it's snowflakey. Every organization would probably be different, but it's a fun problem.
We're all unique.
Yeah, I think for us, I think we do a really good job with our bigger customers, you know, but just we have so many, and it's a long tail, and we're experimenting with like a getting started kind of tool inside of our interface. So we actually were building it before we got Pendo, so we use Pendo as the launcher mechanism for an existing guide that we built that's really about getting started. So we're trying to reach out to those, because for us, I mean, if you think about it, engineering students usually in their junior, senior year, and then graduate students use our product, the product that I manage, Engineering Village, and we have a huge rotation. There's people coming in and out. They only use it for assignments, and they go away. So we really have a big challenge. We have a big 80% or you know, users are extremely novice. So we're trying to catch them. So be able to segment, back to segment again, knowing when they hit for the first time or it's been over 60 days or something, then we can start tailoring their experience to help them get that through that specific task. We probably won't try to get that person to register, because we can do segmentation. We can know who that user is, and they're likely not going to want to register, but we can give them just what they need just to do their job at that moment in time. So we're trying to use that, but we have other avenues to help them kind of get on board, so to speak, online mostly. Yep.
Question?
So, Brooks, I like where your head is when you're talking about tracking by specific behavior. You mentioned you're tracking like 1,000 metrics or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious how that breaks down per feature component, and what were the early numbers, when you first started recognizing the value there? Was it a much smaller operation?
So the process, I'm accused of flying by the seat of my pants, and that would not be wrong. So the process for that was I'm a huge believer, the dude has converted me to this vision of value of human input, right? So the way I approach that problem is to go to the people who are the experts in their field and really have their heart in a problem, and I asked them, what matters? What matters? And so those are the things that I started tracking. And that's what developed that corpus of data. So I'm warehousing so many KPIs that are the things that humans have said, these are the things that matter. Now, if I can get freebies in there, because I'm like, gather data first, ask questions later, right? If I can get freebies in there, I do. But I always start every kind of experiment from the premise of, let's try to replicate human compassion and understanding in this to make some assumption. So that's sort of where that started. So it was warehousing KPIs is like the first technical problem, as dictated by the people who have their heart in the game. And then it became, how do we, who are let's ignore those. Let's now ask the people who have their heart in the game of conversion, just who. Let's ignore, like I said, ignore what goes into it. Just tell me, the end of the day, who. And that was the second input. So it was not a mathematically driven input. It was a very human driven input, but the automation came from scaling the human, the connections, right? Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. So, and I guess the other question I have too is, you always use it in conjunction with AI and machine learning, or did you have a more manual process prior to that?
Prior, it was extremely, extremely manual. And to this day, the way the system is set up, it does daily exports into Excel spreadsheets. So people who want to do things with the data outside of what the machine learner is configured to do, they can still do that. So they dump the data into spreadsheets, and they have their pivot tables and do kind of some manual analysis of that. But then, see, that's also interesting, right? Because then that gives me the opportunity to look at what they're doing and ask, hey, is that something that scales? Is that something that we should be, is it appropriate to use machine learning for those problems, or is it better to have that human touch point every time? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about like recursing. So that recurses the behavioral monitoring trend, right? So we're doing behavioral monitoring of behavioral monitoring, right? So yeah, that pattern that works out here also works here. So it's kind of what we're doing. Yeah.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we will be all around. You guys are here tomorrow?
I will not be, regrettably.
Yeah, I will.
So if you have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out to any of us. Thanks. And hope to see you all tonight at dinner.
Thanks.